for joining our workshop. My name is Sheila Voss. I'm joined by Ryan Blum. We're not going to introduce ourselves properly yet because we're going to get right into you all introducing yourselves at your table. And one of the things that I know this conference and this group of people love, I imagine, is maps. I've seen lots of maps already. I particularly love maps that erase the geopolitical boundaries and get you thinking about what the land and water wants to do. So I for one have a preference for maps like this. So with that, you all have a challenge. You're going to introduce yourselves to your table, and we're going to set a timer here pretty quickly because this is a speed challenge. In the middle of your table, in the folders, you will have some parts of a map, ecoregion map of the Midwest. And you will have 5 minutes to put that map together in the center of your table and affix it to the center of your table in the best way that you can. And when I say the best way that you can, the pieces will not fit exactly together. So first of all, extra credit when you introduce yourselves, when you put the map together, and I have glue there for you guys. I also have some tape if you're a tape person. Put it together as a team, and then once it's together, take a pebble, any pebble that speaks to you. I see some of you have already selected your personal pebble, and place it where you live. Place it where you live, and then introduce yourself. Extra credit if you can introduce yourself not by your city and state, but by the ecoregion in which you live. Now, I have cheat sheets here. I have a set here and a set here that show the code, but I'll start off. So I'm Sheila. I live in the Eco Hills region along the interior river valleys of Illinois. I could have said I live in Edwardsville, Illinois, part of the metro of St. Louis, but that's super boring. So as an example, extra credit if you can introduce yourself by your ecoregion, and extra credit if you don't say out loud how frustrated you are that the pieces don't absolutely fit together, because I'm not very good at math apparently. And I got the ratio of Illinois a little bit wrong. I mean, I'm from Illinois, so Illinois is like really big. And so you're gonna be like, she didn't get this right. She's not good at math. Work with me. Okay, work with me and just put it together. It's kind of going to be like abstract art project. Okay, so be fine with that. And you can judge, just don't judge out loud. Okay, just don't judge out loud. All right. Okay, so any questions about this? And you will have 5 minutes, and you have to put them out together, affix it to the table, place your pebble, and introduce yourself to your table mates. Does everybody have that?
Yeah. What do we do with the pens?
You can keep the pens.
Okay.
You'll be using them later on today in this activity, but not right now. But you can keep the pens. They're a gift from me. Are we going to time it? Ready? Ready? Go.
We're just putting that together.
Should be done at 9:12.
Okay.
What are you?
Yes. So did not speak into my microphone the whole time.
Oh, I should have reminded. Oh, we can start it.
Yeah, you can take these if you want. There's only 2 sets, but you need to.
Fortunately for recording this part.
Exactly. People are like, what the heck were they doing?
I heard I'm seeing these as well. Tricky if I were to request pictures now then.
This is all nice.
Fixing.
Fixing. There's more. Yeah, taste here. If you're more of a hate person. Also testing everybody's geography. And if you. Try to fix it to the middle. To the middle.
Yeah, you got it.
To the most part.
Illinois? Oh, like where we're from or? Yeah.
Right by the.
But it was cool.
Yeah, so both of my.
You pick. I got hope.
She does.
She does like history and like civics courses.
I graduated like 5 days ago, so I still kind of have two identities. Yeah. But I'm here. What did you study? Environmental theory?
Looks Midwesty to me.
Yeah. And then you must.
Yes.
I live in.
2.5 more.
Okay,
But I moved
My
to
fruit.
DC.
If everyone's done, we can end it a minute early.
that's true.
Welcome.
Welcome. You are,
Okay, this
you are
is
together.
here. Oh, okay. I'm from the banks of the Chickasaw River in western Wisconsin.
Placing, where you
Yeah, so we're basically.
introducing yourself as your table mates, when you place the pebble. Where you are.
Entire organization is remote, so, because we were. What did you find, Jackson?
Very north.
Yeah. Can I see it?
Yes, I know, it's about a little out of, from maybe scale, but it's, you know. Eastern.
Bluefield Hills, where are you from?
What is that?
I'm from Bluefield Hills.
I'm from Fort Beach. Yeah.
You're Detroit.
Yeah, near Detroit, yeah. That's true. Everything counts in Fort here in Detroit, and according to the people.
All right.
It's fun. Nowhere. I think I'm like right on the line.
Is Lisa McLean, remember? I'm only wondering because I was in Congress class here.
Yeah.
And we had a simulation. I'm pretty sure I had the phone as my district.
I'm still thinking about her money. I don't think I went to dinner. I have no idea.
My apologies if the pebble is off the map, I didn't include where you were geographically.
I kind of the.
All right. Okay.
This is, just
Trying to get-
Eastern Woodlands table here.
Apparently, yes, and that extra credit, if you can self-identify as a pod, you know, not just your own person in our region as a table.
Yeah. Well, if people
To be clear, there's nothing I'm giving you pens for your extra credit.
Well, there we go.
Photos together? Or they combined on one piece of paper?
Yeah, they're combined onto, yeah, some of them are 2 states in one. Some of them are single states.
She grouped the rectangle states.
It's easier to cut. They were,
Some of the chef states.
that's right. That's right. Right. Yeah.
All right, I think we're at about time here, folks.
But the tables are kind of clustered already. Well, they're so, okay, did everybody place their pebbles? I only see, I see, okay.
It got
There we go.
It's,
Go.
yeah.
I see the accuracy of putting those under there.
No, I noticed none of these tables, no shit's in the wall.
Oops, so sorry. Great. Okay, thank you guys for doing that. So hopefully you all bonded a little bit. And the only reason I'm speaking into the mic, by the way, I know that everyone else can this, right? But we've been asked to speak for the recording. There's no video recording, there's just an audio recording. So anyway, I just wanted you to know that. So hopefully you know a little bit more about each other. Thank you for identifying yourself on the map. I wanted to go ahead now and properly welcome you and introduce who I am, and Ryan will introduce who he is. So my name is Sheila Voss. I serve as the Senior Vice President of Communications for the Good Food Institute. The Good Food Institute is a global nonprofit. I am based in the Midwest. If I had a pebble, in fact, I'll take a pebble and I will place myself on this map to diversify the geographic regions. I am right, where's Edwardsville? Right there. And Ryan, when you introduce yourself, you're going to have to place your pebble too. And you can choose to place it where you live or Madison. I'll let that be up to you. I am based in Edwardsville, Illinois, but I work for a global nonprofit. We do have, our US team does have offices in DC, but we also have teams, GFI teams in Brazil, in Europe, in India, in Israel, in Asia Pacific, including Singapore, Japan, and Korea. What we do, we are a science-driven think tank that is all about advancing the science and the policy and the industry around alternative proteins. If you're not familiar with that term, later on Ryan will be illuminating you on what that is, but basically it's other ways to create the food that people love, right? Other ways, other diverse ways of producing meat, primarily meat, seafood, eggs, and dairy, using plants, cultivating them from cells, or using the ancient science, which is now being perfected into a modern science of fermentation. So we are all about that. And I love the fact that I'm here at this conference around climate. I will say what's interesting is that from the first night till now, I haven't heard the term agriculture and food that much. And I think, and I'm not criticizing this conference at all. That's just that's not a surprise to me, because in climate communications and in climate circles, I think agri-food and agriculture is kind of the last to the party. It's kind of that last frontier of being folded in to serious climate conversations. So I want you to think about that a little bit as you go through this workshop with us. And you will be doing a lot on the white sheet here as part of this workshop. But one of the things that we do is we also are all about generating new talent for the field, generating a robust scientific ecosystem for the field. And with that, I will hand it to Ryan to introduce who he is.
Hello, folks. So my name is Ryan Blum. I'm a junior here at UW-Madison. So I'm studying science communication, food systems, global health, political science, all with an interest in agriculture, the food system. And because of that, with help from the Good Food Institute, GFI, they helped me start a chapter of a club on campus called the Alternative Protein Project, or APP for short, or APP. And what we're trying to do as an organization is help UW-Madison and other college campuses with their own chapters be research initiatives and cultural changes for alternative proteins. So there's a lot of research that universities can do to help the alternative protein space, help it advance, help solve a lot of problems, and potentially offer solutions for a lot of the problems in the world. And it's also a great way for students on campus. If you are a student here on campus or another college and you're looking to learn more about the food space, I would encourage you to look if they have a chapter of the Alternative Protein Project.
Excellent. You need to place your pebble.
Yes, I do.
Choose your.
So I'm going to do my hometown, Bloomfield Hills, near Detroit, which should be right about there.
And for those who are new, pick a pebble and when you can, place it wherever you're based and introduce yourself to your table. Okay. Sure, I'm on again. All right. Okay, so with that, me and Ryan just have a few, we're not going to be talking at you that much this morning. We just have a few background slides that he'll share in a second. But what we hope to gain today and what we hope that you will gain today are a few things. So we hope that you'll have a better understanding of the climate and biodiversity benefits of diversifying how meat is made. And diversifying is a really key word here. So we're just like any transition, right, where you need a diversified mix of solutions. We are about introducing different ways of producing meat, seafood, eggs, and dairy that use less land, less water, cause less emissions, et cetera. So, and you'll also learn a little bit more about the analogies to what you're probably really familiar with, right? Whether it's renewable energy, electric vehicles. You will learn how and why communities right here in the Midwest, in communities that you're looking at right now on your map, are already leaning in to alternative proteins for a variety of reasons around food security, around environmental benefits, around public health benefits. So you'll hear a little bit about that. And you should be able to describe one way, by the end of this workshop, one way that a shift towards alternative proteins aligns with and enables your own goals. So no matter who you are, no matter who you work with, or if you're a student, or if you're a nonprofit, or if you're faculty, or if you're with an NGO, or if you're with a municipal government, all the different backgrounds that are represented at this summit, we hope that you'll be able to describe one way that what we're talking about here today aligns with your own goals. And then lastly, we hope that you'll be able to identify one action that you can take to integrate food system solutions writ large, so whether alt proteins or other food system solutions, into your climate strategies. Because here's the thing, here's a primary takeaway that I hope, if there's one thing that I hope you leave today with, is that no climate action plan is complete without addressing food and agriculture. If we do not address food and agriculture, there's no way we make global emissions targets. No way. So that's the one takeaway. The rest that Ryan and I say could be wah, 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 wah. But I want everybody to leave with this takeaway. Okay. All right. Okay. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you. So
Do
if
you
we,
want this to
oh,
advance?
sure.
It's that forward one.
This one here?
Yeah.
So just a little context of what we're getting at. You might have already heard the facts that was just talked about how in the food system, or if we look at all the emissions and all the climate degradation going on, the food system is something we have to address. Now, why is this the case? Well, if we look at what practices in the food industry cause the most resource use, land, water, emissions, tend to be ones higher up on the food chain, more energy intensive, typically are animal foods such as meat. And meat consumption is just going up. So this is going up for two main reasons. One, the human population is increasing. So as there's more people on Earth, more meat is being eaten. Additionally, per capita, each individual person overall, if you aggregate all across the world, is eating more meat. It varies from place to place, some places less, some places more, but as countries develop, typically meat consumption rises. And it's not just meat, also other animal products, dairy, especially eggs, increase as well. And one thing I like to think about as well is these animal products, as they continue to increase in consumption, comes along with a lot of other baggage. So we're here at a climate conference, we're talking a lot about environmental stuff, but there's also other issues that intersect and overlap, whether it's antibiotic resistance or public health that's alluded to. There's a lot of areas in this space that are really important to think about as this consumption continues to rise around the world. So that really develops a need for alternative proteins if we're going to meet our climate goals, if we're going to help our public health. How can we actually serve this demand for animal products, this demand for meat that people want to consume in a way that actually doesn't come with all this problematic baggage? So one idea here is something called the global land squeeze. Has anybody heard of this term before? It's getting at the idea of talking mainly about land use. So just from a pure math perspective, if we're going to continue having the same demand go up for animal products over time, especially ruminant animal products like dairy and red meat, there's just simply not enough land on the planet for us to be able to do that without having some people eating less. If we're all going to keep increasing at the rate we are, it just won't work math wise. Most of the world's land can't be used for agriculture, and then what is used for agriculture, most of that's used for either grazing animals or growing crops to feed animals. Very little is direct human consumption. So according to the World Food Bank, Production causes 1/3 of global greenhouse gas emissions. And that's quite a lot, right? And if you think about, a recipe for a living planet, this is a great study looking at, to what extent our emissions are a part of the big picture, and estimates vary. But if you think about just all the people we have to feed and everything that goes along into that, that's just, a massive, massive problem. So what are alternative proteins themselves? There's three main types that the Good Food Institute talks about and that are widely considered alternative protein types. That's plant-based meat, cultivated, and fermentation products. So I'm curious, I'll lay it out as like a 1, 2, or 3 scale. One is this is like your first time hearing about alternative proteins. 2 is you've heard of it, you can't really talk about it in depth. You might know what some are. And 3 is you feel pretty comfortable explaining and knowing what it is. So who here fits into the 1 category?
All alternative proteins?
Yeah, yeah. I guess we'll go with all. Yeah. Okay, what about 2? There's like most people. That's about what I expected. Anybody in the 3 category? Thought about this quite before? Cool. 2.5. Okay. Makes sense. So with plant-based meat, you can think of like Beyond or Impossible Burgers. There's been plant-based alternatives for a while, but they're not really often meaty. So back in the 90s, early 2000s, you might think of a garden or a veggie burger. Not only in the last 10 years have we really seen plant-based analog meats who are really trying to replicate the taste, texture, and overall experience of animal products. And the reason that these exist is to give alternatives to people who want a similar experience to animal products, but they don't want to come with all the emissions. They don't want to have to slaughter an animal, things like that. And there's a lot of research, R&D going into the space to help improve these plant-based meats. But because there are some basic limitations to how close you can get to meat with something that isn't animal tissue, there are other alternatives trying to be developed. So that middle picture is cultivated from, I believe, a company called Upside Foods. And cultivated meat, sometimes called lab-grown meat, but typically cultivated is like the more term that we use. And with cultivated meat, it's actual animal cells grown in a bioreactor to make really essentially identical animal product as the end result. So if you bite into, who here's been to plant-based meat before? Not cultivated, plant-based. Yeah, most of you. If you recall your experience, I like to think sometimes, okay, it's really similar, or maybe it's a little bit different. A lot of times I think, hey, this tastes really good, but not exactly like the real thing. It really depends on the actual product, right? But with cultivated itself, in theory, you won't really be able to tell a difference, especially at that endpoint, because it's quite literally down to a cellular level, that endpoint, really the same thing. So how can we actually scale that up? And that's some of the big challenges in that industry, because as any new technologies we may discuss with EVs, renewables, it starts off really expensive, but then over time can become cheaper as it scales up. And that last one is fermentation. Fermentation itself is not an old thing. We've been doing fermentation for food and other things for thousands of years, from making alcohol, beer, cheese, fermented vegetables. Fermentation itself, as an alternative protein, we can use precision fermentation, having the microbes select for the ones that we want them to do. So they can break down matter, we can select for ones to make higher protein, better tasting protein. And actually, some of those plant-based meats that we talked about earlier use a combination of fermentation. Maybe in the future, we'll see combinations of cultivated fermentation or even cultivated and plant-based to help lower the costs, make it easier for consumers to reach price parity, and then eventually actually make it on store shelves. Yeah, absolutely. Have you heard of it's called corn, not CORN, but QUORN, I believe. So they use like fermentation, mycoprotein is another one. You won't really see it advertised, I think, as clearly. It's a little bit more subtle sometimes in its like use. But it's honestly, I think it's some of the best products they have out there. And you can also make other things like protein powders that way and ice cream. Dairy, yep. Mm-hmm.
So in fermentation, there's a couple different types of platforms like biomass. You can just use biomass like fungi to make protein. That's what Meaty is. They have chicken cutlets and it's a pretty common brand. Is anyone familiar with Meaty? Okay. And then what Ryan is talking about with precision fermentation, that's like really looking at how microbes, like let's say yeast, can be programmed to make certain proteins as ingredients for food. So right now there's fermentation derived dairy, some out there a little bit, but that's still in its early days.
Yep.
So when we say things like seitan, that would be plant-based.
Yep.
Plant-based, yeah.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And I would say, you know, like, I mean, even just beans, something that's not even like a alternative protein we think about, are just plant protein with, you know, plants just have protein. So the plant-based protein will often will process in a way to add salt and oils and other things to make it more replicate the taste. But all of this is very in the early stages. You know, plant-based meat, really the most of the R&D in the last 10, 12 years. I mean, on a grand scale of things, that's so little compared to all the research we have into conventional animal products. So there's really a lot of optimism and possibility in this space.
I'll take this one. So again, this summit has been almost entirely focused on what's really familiar when we talk in climate circles, right? Renewables, EV, electrification of the grid, transportation, housing. So what my primary takeaway, which was what, again, just testing, that I wanted you all to leave. Thank you. Extra credit for you. So a good analogy, though, is you can think about these different ways of producing protein similar to renewables, similar to EVs. So let's think about that analogy for a little bit. We know that even though energy efficiency and encouraging people to use less energy is a good thing, we also know that population goes up, energy use is still going to go up. People are still going to use energy. So the whole theory of renewable energy is let's make that energy in a different way that has a lighter footprint. Same thing with EVs. We know that in terms of driving, yes. Do we know that public transportation and other infrastructure to get people to drive less are important? Yes, that has value. And we know that people are still going to drive. So can we make those vehicles in a way that has a lighter footprint? I hope in my lifetime and yours that electric vehicles are no longer called electric vehicles. I hope they're just called vehicles or cars. That'd be great, right? So that's where the analogy is, right? So we know that, so part of my background for years, I laughed when Heather at her opening comment said, hey, there's some cool networking that happens. Like I'm on a call and someone says, hey, I worked for Missouri Botanical Garden. Well, I worked at Missouri Botanical Garden for 10 plus years. I headed up their education team. And as an environmental educator, and I'm sure many in the room also, we collectively have been trying for decades, right, to encourage people to eat lower on the food chain, right? Eat more plants. Do what Michael Pollan says, right? We have, collectively, we have. And those efforts are worthy. They're still going on. They still have a place, but they're not enough. And they're not working at the pace and the scale needed. So do we need those efforts and campaigns? Yes, but the truth, and I'm so glad I'm in the beef eaters room, right? I actually embrace that. Like Heather was like, are you okay? We put you in the beef eaters room. I was like, yes, we're in the beef eaters room because it proves the point. People love meat. It's delicious. People want to keep eating it around the world. Meat demand, as Ryan said in his charts, meat demand tracks with income all around the world. And there's about 10 to 12 different studies that look at projections of meat demand. And between those 10 to 12 studies, they range from meat demand rising by, at the lowest, the most conservative is by 50% by 2050, the most conservative. That's based on 2012 levels. The higher end is 260%. So you can see where that global land squeeze comes into play, right? We're going to run out of, like, it's just a math problem. We're just going to run out of room if we keep producing meat in the same ways that we are now. So we need diverse ways of making it. So you can think about alternative proteins as the renewables of food. We're not about telling people what to eat. Thanks. We're not about telling people what to eat. We're about, or taking away anyone's burger. No one wants to take away anyone's burger. We just want to change how that burger is made, or rather diversify how that burger is made. All right, with that, I'm going to invite Ryan to invite you to our first prompt.
This is where things are going to get a little bit more discussion based. I know, exciting. So in what ways does your region's food and agriculture affect you and your community? Think about that for a moment. And how does it affect your region or organization's climate and sustainability goals? So think about what you do, why you're at this conference. Think about that from a food lens. Consider both positive and negative aspects. And I'll give one quick example. I think about here at UW-Madison, lots of dairy work being done with conventional dairy products. So I think, hey, how can we use the already existing research institution here maybe to think about alternative dairy products? They already have the infrastructure. How can that work? So I encourage you, think about this prompt, think about it for a moment, discuss among yourselves at the table, among each one at your table for a few minutes.
The right here. Your responses, the problem, and you can be messy here. You can be messy, but document. Use the white space in front of you to literally write down some thoughts to prompt one. And I can take this out of the way. So
Well, the paper's here for. Yeah, just under 10 minutes we'll have for this.
in your space, on your white. So.
We'll probably give this like 9:40.
Okay.
6 minutes, but that should be enough. Yeah. You want me to just sneak a picture of you when you're speaking? Yeah, how about right now? That was a good time. Just. I know you're not literally speaking.
So did you get one of
What was that?
Did you get one of our reports?
As a physical copy?
Yes.
No, I got the online. How fun.
Yeah, and then this was just the one pager that I brought, in case if someone wanted to take it, it's just like a little.
See this in PDF form?
Yeah,
Yep.
take one of the, or you can take it.
No, actually, yeah.
Yeah, if you, I mean, like, yeah, I think that's, I forget.
Student org fairs.
There you go,
Helpful.
yeah, yeah, I believe whatever I don't use here.
Yeah, oh, I forgot to bring my sticker as well.
That's okay, that's okay. Anyway, it's a good. I gave them enough.
But we have also a lot of our work in Northeast Ohio. The other.
That's most of the population has small towns, and like there's a lot of food, a lot of farm operators. Love what they do, they work.
Most fishing.
Lakers,
How many conferences do you go to a year?
And yeah, you have commercial fisheries.
Where's the DFI retreat?
To the Atlas.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's all next week, but I haven't seen some of my colleagues.
Yeah.
How's it?
Yeah.
It's great, it's great, it's also, it's nice to got to. Face to face. Yeah.
Say, alt protein chapter at Minnesota. So.
I told my slave, texted across.
Yeah.
So I would last.
Yeah.
It's like, but then, said, so do you know this person?
No.
I mean, there's
So he said to me, hey, if you have time, I don't today. I don't want to like just email this guy, like, hey, on the campus, do you like, because I don't want to disrespect to his time, but I figured you might want to know this person. So he's a professor here. Greg, author of Household Education. So you might want to check him out.
You write this down.
Let me text.
You just want to text me that link?
Largest scale.
with the perspective.
There we go.
You're here.
I'm here, but I work for an organization. And Midwest Tall Grass.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
What was his response to beef eaters? Was he just thought that was,
You thought it was possible.
yeah.
Much of it's.
And Ryan says hi. And so.
I know he has a million people in his network. I'd be pleasantly surprised, but I don't think he'd remember me unless a conversation brought it up. Like, it's the thing.
Does he have this interesting brain?
Yeah.
You know.
Maybe, yeah. You know, yeah. I know he loosely follows some of what allied scholars done just through Faraz.
Yeah.
Maybe he knows me from that too.
Now there's a change from to honesty to energy.
Yeah.
Wide range.
I'm gonna give it a minute. Yeah. Yeah. All right, folks, we'll give this a last 30 seconds here for this prompt. One thing that's
Feel free to chime in economically if you want to add to what. But also taking this. Dining.
yeah.
So feel free, like when I sort of stop, I'm not.
Yeah.
So you want to chime in with some of that.
I think it's interesting, amazing how such busy people like groups into their.
Yeah.
It's CFO or just.
Founder and.
Yeah. Yeah, despite their busyness, they're still so connect with people.
Totally. Gosh. And I'm lucky that I, myself, and then my policy colleagues and my development colleague.
Yes, our area. That's committee.
Always worked in line. Politics are things that wow, it's stronger.
Actually, we're getting.
It's real. Welfare. Other donors that.
Yep. All right, folks, we're gonna move on to our next prompt here.
All right. So thank you all for doing a little bit of that and recognizing, thank you for stepping into that intersection that we were talking about, how climate, biodiversity, food and ag intersect and the lenses that you all bring from where you live. So building on that, okay, so no need to read all of this. I know this breaks all of the rules of a slide of like, well, it's way too many words. So please don't read these words. I'm just gonna speak a little bit to why I put this up, and then Ryan might add some color. But here we are in the Midwest. You're looking at the map in front of you is ecoregions, but we know that if there was a Google Earth map, envision a Google Earth map of that same geography, and what would be the dominant landscape here in the Midwest? Corn and soy specifically, right? And going towards what? So much going into livestock feed, some of it going into ethanol. Less than 7% of soy grown on planet Earth goes to directly to human food. Indirectly, it goes to animals, indirectly cycles through animals to get to us eventually in the form of meat. But yeah, so here in the Midwest, again, I'm a So another little personal layer for me. I married into a farming family, conventional ag family. They don't have animals anymore, but they grow right now. It's a 400-acre farm in the Kaskaskia River Valley, right? And it primarily grows, right now it's in double wheat and corn and millet, all for animal feed. So I married into a farming family. And I know that the Midwest has a strong identity, tradition, and culture of feeding the world. I mean, feeding the world. We literally feed the world in the Midwest. And what I liked about, I don't know if all of you were at the opening remarks for the keynote. One of the things I heard was about how we can do two things at once. We can honor tradition and culture and legacy and embrace innovation. The two things are not mutually exclusive. The other thing I heard is that we can and should have difficult conversations, right? So those two things I heard the first night, and I think they're relevant here. So again, you don't have to read this, but this is kind of my social proof to you that your peers, that there are peers here in the Midwest, organizations, some of them are universities, some of them are state level governments, some of them are public-private partnerships that are leaning in to alternative proteins, leaning into food biomanufacturing in ways that blend and complement traditional, conventional ways of growing food and biotechnology and innovative ways of growing food to diversify food, because the Venn diagram here is food security, environmental benefits, jobs and bioeconomies. So many of these places, Indiana, so anyone here from Indiana? Okay, so in Richmond, Indiana, there is a, yeah. So, and I was able to go to the groundbreaking. I had like it was great. So in the middle of a cornfield, there is the nation's first ever custom built precision biomanufacturing contract facility that will enable foods, proteins to be grown using corn feedstocks, using food waste and other things that, so income for farmers. And it's in a community, like many rural communities that have suffered from decades of disinvestment, and it's bringing jobs. And it's not in the face of conventional ag, it's adding to, it's additive. It's to conventional ag. So times that by multiple different examples here of different places, even in Wisconsin, in Janesville, Wisconsin, where's Janesville? Like an hour from here. They are opening up this summer a dedicated alternative protein innovation center that looks at plant-based fermentation and cultivated. Did you want to add some color about Illinois Wisconsin?
Yeah, one thing I'll add is, looking at this map, I'm like a very visual person. I'm thinking, what state here is like the central Midwest state? And just from the map, it kind of looks like Iowa, but I think culturally it's Iowa, it's Wisconsin, it's Illinois. It's all these states essentially. But, there's so much farming, and it's so not only food is personal, but our livelihoods are personal. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier that I think is important for context as well is we talked about, what % of the agricultural land is used for growing crops for animal feed or not directly human consumption. That's really important because if it's about 80% of those crops are grown for animal feed, we only produce 20% or so of the calories back for actually us to eat. So it's really inefficient that way. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so with this in mind, and with your answers to the prior prompt, and there's only 3 prompts today, by the way, so I like to think in threes. So now the second prompt is this. So we're going to do a little bit now of asset mapping. So all of you live in communities that have gobs and gobs of assets. And when we're talking about assets, we're talking about all sorts of things. We're talking about institutions and organizations. We're talking about people. We're talking about places and policies and practices. We're also talking about rural communities, urban communities. Some of those have innovation districts in them. We're talking about even softer, less tangible things like your ethos and your culture. St. Louis, right across the river from where I am, it's a pretty foodie town. Like, so that's what I'm talking about. Like, what's the ethos? What's the culture? So take a bit and on your same, please help us populate this, because at the end here, we hope it's all the white space is filled in. Take the next 10 minutes or so and do some asset mapping. Think about the assets in your own community that alternative proteins could align with, could be leveraged, and that leaning into all proteins, like those communities that I showed on the prior map, how leaning in actually leverages those assets, actually builds on those strengths, and helps you achieve the goals that you're trying to achieve on climate, biodiversity, et cetera. Okay, so with that, 10 minutes.
And don't be afraid to write in big letters. You can fill the whole paper. After prompt 3,
Yeah, I mean, like when.
like after prompt 3.
Yeah.
I think if we should finish prompt 3 by like 10:10, we should be good. I can spell my computer if you don't want to mess with this.
That's okay. So this is not. This is
Oh,
not-
I see.
Yes, so prompt. That, we're gonna.
Yeah.
do this. And then I think with prompt 3 though, that's when we also wanna. Yeah, so. We want that to be scaled. Right?
They'll bring in discussion like the whole process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, prompt 3 through. Start. Prompt 3 starts at 10.
Oh, sorry.
Start at 10.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, then you give them, it's like 5 minutes or so to think anything about their table.
You're growing it.
And then, yeah, discuss at their table. And then for the last 20 minutes, you and I can invite and solicit.
Oh, right, because I think we have to, you know, we have sent.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can call it like talking as a group.
Yes, but after they have a chance to.
Yes.
I guess. Hopefully prompt 3 does.
Straight land grant universities.
I like those GFI glue sticks. I'm just kidding.
I want those after all the last night or whatever I got in.
The airport's so easy here, so small, so easy. Dane County, the airport here is so easy. Dane County is so small. Yeah. You flew from where to where?
It's going to.
Yeah.
So from St. Louis, probably like a 6-hour drive.
Yeah.
Plus, I had a.
More productive
plane
time,
credit,
yeah.
I had a plane.
Yeah.
I had to.
Yeah.
So I'm actually saving GSI money.
Yeah.
It's fun enough that they had. So I
Yeah.
actually fly to Chicago.
Interesting.
And then take a-
There's honestly not a lot of directs.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm lucky, I get Detroit to Madison direct, but if I'm going to DC, little direct California, little direct. Yeah,
No, I just find. That's beautiful forests and that's one. So that is just very.
flight from Chicago to Madison, that's a short flight.
So my summer. Is security, so I have a son.
Yeah.
My son is a junior at University of Illinois. He studied natural resources management with the minor.
Yeah.
Very cold, but it comes right out to set up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I told my son that I was here and what there's a time.
Yeah.
And he got it. And what was the one?
I just said.
Here?
I love something like.
So he was a little bit bitter.
The city.
Yeah. You know, it's funny.
Because he loves Urbana. He loves.
Yeah. The thing is the five that I was sort of, my five favorite to apply to was UW-Mass and UIUC, Urbana, Ohio State, Purdue, and Penn State. And, yeah, Penn State, yeah, yeah, yes. I could not get to Penn. And, yeah, I wouldn't want, I mean, I love it here. I have ag stuff here. It's huge. It's, yeah. Anyway, Ohio State is actually the one I didn't get to. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Negative is very heavy. Very traditional.
Corn and soybeans that they can use for.
I'm glad the comment wasn't made.
Yeah.
Or if you do that.
Not stress free.
Not stressed.
Yeah.
But I'm really lucky that they both are,
Yeah.
they both love where they land. So.
Amazing. Do you ever spend time in DC? Are you there often?
So I will be there this June for.
Well, hey, I'll be in DC.
Oh, you will?
I will. I'll be in DC all summer.
So I'll be there June 16th or 18th.
Maybe to get some coffee or something. Yeah. Yeah, your phone. So.
I'll be having that
Okay.
group to talk about how to use communication strategies to encourage your plant rich diet. Inclusive of all kinds of things. And really looking at the research you've done and how to do that with public sensing and how to effectively counter information and disinformation.
I'm essentially a comms major. I mean, this is a lot of. Oh, yeah.
I'll see.
Okay.
Actually, that is almost.
Yeah, I mean, is most of your comms work engaging with stakeholders, or is it raw level of like, I'm on Instagram or something and it's just information out, I mean, misinformation after misinformation?
You know,
Yeah.
we don't try to be awesome.
Yeah.
Talking to consumers. Yes. It's our primary audiences are scientists, also industry. And also indirectly communicate to consumers on leadership after your times.
Yeah.
It's just like, we're not the face. But you know that others are.
Yeah.
And so you kind of really like to kind of learn it. And we're best in the ways to.
Yeah.
Like. Don't, you know, like when you're looking at the basically.
In a comment section on Facebook, yes.
You just don't do it. Yeah, they duplicate.
Real quick, folks, we've got a couple more minutes to think about this prompt. Yeah. I had a chance, I had a phone call with from a Valetti over the summer, and he was telling me just like the need for like these, you know, like disinformation online and quick video social media platforms. That is like where his possibilities as a company and how much the need for that is. I mean, it's very neglected, so maybe I'll do an input later or something. Yeah, I know they struggle a lot with that. Yeah.
Like if it was you know, if I didn't know, well, it's all influencers like chefs and others that can mainstream and make it.
I mean, I think the key, and this goes for podcasting too, is you have to get people who aren't in the space to talk good about space. Yeah.
That's right, it doesn't, that's why the most often communications, my team is looking for. Who else? That's just like, I'm being listening. Right, so you know, the right now. So last night, so I'm among the people that I read through it. He's been it's also like that. Educated. Writing a book.
So there's a mismatch culturally between this, like, and we're right for fees. Right, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Look at see if they're gonna be a-
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think so little people actually know about this background, which is probably intentional. Yeah. I mean, it's,
But for
yeah,
those detractors, they will find that out.
right, of course. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. My biggest regret is not getting one of my degrees. So there's a limit to how many animal ag classes I can take because I'm not a science major. So I wish if I could have gone back or take 4 years of school, I would have majored in that a little bit more, so I have more credibility in that space. Yeah, sure. That's true. Well, well, I'm a little too out there online to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going up to the place.
Yeah.
And then that,
Yeah.
and then decided, like, I felt I was already.
Yeah.
You're excited. It's because I was like, but I was working full time when I died.
Yeah, yeah.
It's bad that I didn't go straight
Yeah.
into it. I think there's a lot of value.
Yeah. I think we'll wrap this one up. All right, folks, wrap up your last couple sentences here, and we'll move on to our next prompt. Do you have the pointer thing? Is the next slide prompt 3 or is?
Yeah, next one is next. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right, I'm doing this one, right? Am I doing this one?
No, I'm doing this one.
Oh, you're doing this
Nope,
one.
you're
Okay.
okay. All right, folks, as we wrap that up, thank you for that prompt. We'll think about our third prompt here. So this one is sort of like overall tying it all in. How it's going to work is I'm going to give you guys a little bit less time, maybe 5 minutes to discuss among yourselves, and we'll bring it back as a bigger group. So I want you to, thinking about those last 2 prompts, think additionally about describe one way that advancing alternative proteins enables your own organization or region's sustainability goals. And I want you to identify one action that you or your organization that you represent, or could be you personally in your personal life, could take to integrate alternative proteins into your climate strategies and plans. And I'll give one example to get you thinking. In the last 45 minutes, I've thought about, hey, maybe I should be attending more conferences because this is my first one. So that's something I want to integrate. But yeah, think about those 2 things, talk among your group for another 5 minutes, and then we'll do a little bit more of a bigger group. And questions? Yeah.
I don't want to drive your workshop, but
Yep.
I keep thinking about food insecurity in the region. I mean, all of us, not all of us, many of us are connected to communities where, the line at the food bank is out the door, around the corner, down the street. And, it feels like there are some, we have these social obstacles and impediments. I don't know how insurmountable they are to some of these challenges. We want to talk about addressing climate goals. We have these challenges in our communities with food insecurity, and we all understand that as we get a hotter world and a more populated world, the demands on our food system. I mean, you talk about 50% growth of meat output, and I'm just how? But when we hit 2.5 degrees Celsius, that's a non-starter.
Right.
So, I mean, I kind of like to see, how do we see and scale? We talked on day 1 about how do we think boldly as well. How do we think about acting boldly while the clock is ticking against some of these other challenges?
Yeah, mind if I? Yeah, so and I think my answer to this might help guide the discussion as well, is, to solve massive problems like this, one where the clock is ticking, I think we need all hands in the game, all hands on deck. And this means, we need people in the most positions of power, whether it's politicians, it's people in the corporate world high up to make it, change, but also to show that there's this demand for change. All of us, from even the basics from what we're buying as a consumer level, all the way to how we're using our careers, all the way from how we talk about this issue, the engagement we're in, going to social gatherings, going to conferences, but working on this as if our lives depend on it, because ultimately in some way or shape it does. that is what's going to ultimately lift this change and any other social movement. So I think across the spectrum of how much power we have into this and how involved we are in this space, we all need to just get more involved and really put our foot on the metal. Yeah. So with that, I would encourage you and think, you know, for food security as well. I mean, an example of this working is if we can use other issues in addition to the environment, one to talk about, hey, this is a holistic solution for so many things, from food security on a local level in a city or a town, all the way to massive climate goals, if there can be an overlapping solution. Yeah. With that, yeah, think for a couple minutes, discuss among yourselves, and then we'll reconvene.
Yes, please. I actually have two small questions.
All right. No, that's an excellent question. You know, your question makes me think of the global situation, not just in the Midwest. So globally, you know, when I think of our work that we do, like sometimes a conversation is completely defeating the what we're conversation. That's what it's about. And you know, the idea of using the crops that we do grow and being already looking at people versus animals resonates there, because with limited finite land, water is on a high and planet. But now, the extent to which we use so much maximize, like the agricultural land we have right now to be it's going to do a couple things. It's going to make food production more efficient. It's also going to affect. It's going to affect prices in a way that makes some crops. Again, agriculture, as we all know, is so complex. I'm not an agriculturist. So I'm not trying to oversimplify things, but growing crops for animal feed prices out of the price affordability of smallholder farmers and others in different parts of Africa and other places. So from addressing food security, addressing malnutrition in certain areas, the extent to which we can grow food that's more nutrient dense and not being lost through the cycle, going through animals, we'll have cascading effects. And again, not trying to oversimplify because it's lots of complexity. It's interesting in the Midwest because the different conversation we're not talking necessarily about malnutrition, but I heard your question about plenty of communities in the Midwest that are food. So again, I think we got to what are we doing with the agricultural land that we have now, and are there other ways that we can use that to feed? That's what conversation.
And then consider how much like or subsidized how many local shift subsidized from just steps for redistribution
or just and subsidies is interesting. We tend to, my organization tends to not talk at all about giving subsidies away. Because that's a no. Given that there's a lot of power by stock lobby, especially here. So we don't do that, but we do talk about equal access to subsidies. There absolutely should be equal access to subsidies for some of these foods that are just trying to get on the shelves, that are just trying to get into price parity, that are just trying to, so if you, that's part of our work that we do on the policy landscape, is trying to get a level playing field so that these foods can compete.
Right, and thinking about food waste and overproduction.
Yeah.
And like there are just so many different buckets of things that change at the same time. The order start tackling.
You're absolutely right, and I hope everybody appreciates that. when me and Ryan are talking about this, neither one of us and GFI are not saying that this is a silver bullet. We're not saying, oh, this will save everything. We're not
Well,
saying that.
think about, we talk about how food is a necessary component to reach common goals. It also goes the other way. Like, we still have to deal with all the fossil fuels and everything. It's just, it's a part of the solution.
Yes, 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 yes. And when you do look at all of the, so not just in carbon dioxide, but when you look at methane and nitrous oxide associated with aniline, like it's all of that globally is more than the entire transportation sector. All of that. So again, if we're serious about addressing and meeting global goals, it will be impossible to meet any of those targets without addressing all of the carbon, nitrous oxide, and methane. Conventional means using meat that's not even a
Yeah.
I see it's rocks.
physics.
But to some, it's an opinion.
To some, it's the right, and it's fascinating. Like me saying it, me coming from an advocacy group, that's all that we.
Yeah.
Serious, real analysis, to be honest.
Saying alternatives. Me saying it,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you.
I think we're gonna give this another minute and then we'll bring it all back to discuss as a big group.
I have some questions here, but they could be offline. I just have a third one.
On the case of sensitive conversation, but about this. Again, so France just published their national climate adaptation. They have said, we are planning adaptation of 2 degrees Celsius by 2030 and 2.7 degrees Celsius by 2060. The implications on our agricultural system because 2 degrees is kind of bad.
And the other thing interesting about cultivated fermentation is that that production can happen in places that are cities, places that are have massive drought issues, or and just think about all the different communities that don't have ready access, that aren't in the food breadbasket of the world. We are in the food, we are food of the world here, right in the Midwest, but there's food and facilities like, a cultivated meat facility looks very much like a brewery. That's what it looks like. A brewery. It looks like what a brewery looks behind the scenes. That's what a fermenter looks like. That can go anywhere as long as it's powered by renewable energy. And that's the other thing, is that I think what we haven't really is connect the dots between, because ultimately won't be stills energy intensive. But if you power it with renewable
That's what my half dissertation here.
thank you for writing your dissertation on this. Our secret agenda was to pull from your brain and keep it on here, because we didn't want your good thinking on your own personal.
It's like, we don't know all the dimensions of energy and water demand and everything else, but if the industry identifies that a competitive advantage is, and again, not to replace everything else, right? Is the broader environmental a minimized environmental footprint.
Right.
And the whole system can be built on with that idea. Let's have renewable energy be a key feature. If the goal is simply, you want to produce as much protein as efficient, which again, there's a reason to argue for it. Let's efficiently produce protein at minimal cost.
Yeah.
And get it out there.
Yeah.
And we'll have the same conflicts.
Same conflict. So you got to tie it all together. Yes, absolutely.
So we might
You're absolutely
have a win on one metric, but we've not published all the other parts.
Estimate of some cultivated facilities that are not powered by renewable energy. Just looks at the modeling that we've done, others have done, other universities have done. That looks at, okay, what is a X leader in the production facility? Powered by 8% renewable,
As you go and get it from the ground up, you've got the ability.
Yes, yes,
Include that.
yes. Are we?
All right, folks, we're gonna wrap up these discussions at your table. Last sentences. If somebody wants to be a brave volunteer and speak, raise your hand for the table. Overall, what your table talked about.
Sorry, clearly I can talk with all of you guys tonight. Sorry, but thank you for allowing me to sit with you guys. Yeah, as Ryan said, we'd love to, hopefully each of those prompts kind of built on each other. Those were intentional in that order, cascading, like looking at what you think about agriculture and the intersection of agriculture, climate, and biodiversity now. Doing some asset mapping to think about what's going on in your community that you think this could align with. And then these prompts, thinking about one way that leaning into this or prioritizing it or elevating it even could actually help you achieve what you're trying to do in climate, your climate work. And again, I know that many people are coming at this from different perspectives and different places of power, but each of you have power. Each of you are whether you're a student, whether you're a nonprofit, whether you're a faculty member, each of you are in positions of influence. So yeah, we would love to hear any volunteers on what you guys talked about or reflections, answers to this prompt.
And it also won't just be like one-on-one hand, we'll make it like a discussion
Yeah.
with everyone. Yeah. But if somebody wants to sort of talk about what they talked about their table, I heard lots of diverse discussions going on.
We had a really wide-ranging discussion, and part of it came down to community and culture and what you're used to. And one of the things.
They could do this only because I think, again, they're trying to record
Sure,
some of the.
sure.
conversation.
So we had a very wide-ranging conversation, but a lot of it came down to community and culture and what people are familiar with. And one of the alternative proteins that you didn't have listed was insects. And I think one of the challenges with people that are used to having meat is they're not really used to cultivated meat or alternative proteins. So it's just developing that familiarity. And a lot of that comes down to attitude, culture, community.
I heard a bit of the discussion over here. Did anyone want to share what you guys talked about?
I can always talk.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
So we had a pretty wide-ranging conversation here. As it would happen, most of us are from the Great Lakes Eastern Woodland region. And so we talked a lot about, well, we have water. Thinking globally, we have water as a resource and as an asset. And so as we think about replacing meat, talking about aquaculture, better fisheries management in our region, and does that, again, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all single solution to any of this. It's going to take a combination of solutions. We also talked about coupling renewable energy with the development of scaling alternative protein manufacturing. Again, we have to think about as we go in one direction, not causing other harm or additional harm by continuing to propagate the use of fossil fuels. So how do we think about from construction from the start, mirroring new facilities with renewable energy and making that part of the package? Some of the things that, we talked a little bit about just this question of scale. The chart that Sheila put up about meat consumptions, it's just enormous. So can we scale alternative protein production to the degree required anytime in the near future is kind of an open question.
That's a great question and something that we at GFI work on a lot. I think the answer is different depending on the platform, depending on plant-based fermentation or cultivated. And for sure, to get to scale requires a few different things. The example that I was talking about in Indiana, sorry, this woman was from Indiana, right? So that's the first of its kind. That's a contract manufacturing facility that allows startups to come in and not have to sink capital cost into their own facility and be able to make products, manufacture that in a way that leverages that contract manufacturing facility. Hopefully, that will then help them advance whatever they're trying to do in a way that decreases costs so that they can be on the path to scalability and ultimately affordability, because these products will not compete if they don't taste the same or better, cost the same or less, and are as accessible and available and affordable as what the other option is. And I can tell you now that no platform is plant-based cultivated or fermentation yet has the scaling capacity, manufacturing capacity yet to meet demand today, much less demand in the future. So we tried it. Part of what we do, we advance the science, we advance the policy. Part of our policy work is unlocking public dollars for R&D as well as for manufacturing incentives. So that Indiana facility got some federal manufacturing incentives. Now, that was under Biden's bioeconomy plan. Do not know the fate of what will happen to biomanufacturing and bioeconomy incentives. One would hope that that's pretty darn bipartisan, right? That's about, building capacity and manufacturing infrastructure here in the great United States of America. So one would hope, but question mark, if those dollars will continue. So once again, I've failed to answer your question in a crisp way because it's a really good question. It's a hard one that we work on all the time. How can we unlock dollars to increase manufacturing capacity and get these products to scale and ultimately affordability for the consumer? Response, yeah, here, I'm gonna bring this to you first and then you.
Thank you. So we were lucky to have a bunch of different types of industries represented at our table. So we were able to come at it from a couple of different angles, whether it be at the university level, at the food industry level, at the manufacturing level. And so we were trying to talk about accessibility. How do we make this accessible? How do we make this look at our assets and figure out who could we partner with in our regions on this to progress? So taking St. Louis as an example, some of our sports teams are really dedicated to using only local vendors. And so we could leverage that to make it more popular and put it right in front of people through this lens, and not only facilitate the conversation about alternative proteins, but facilitate local businesses at the same time. Something that we ran up against is just not feeling like we're being heard from the people that we feel like we need to talk to about this. So whether that's administration, whether that is the manufacturers in more of the meat industry, this is not a priority for them. So how do we do that? We can possibly go from it. It's been a long weekend, y'all. Go for it from more of the popularity angle, like the people are requesting this particular thing. And that is the solution I think a lot of us kind of came to. If anybody else wants to chime in. Cool.
Oh, thanks. I started thinking about as a nonprofit in Kansas City, like St. Louis, we like to support local businesses as much as we can. And thinking about how a majority of the people probably in the city don't really even think about alternative proteins. And we're thinking about this because this is our life and what we want to do, but maybe education around, the environmental aspect of meat and meat production and agriculture, but then encouraging something like Meatless Mondays in schools and teaching children about this, and maybe local businesses and restaurants encouraging that kind of mindset and culture. I think the culture part is really important.
Real quick, is anybody here, raise your hand if you're a student at the university, undergrad or graduate? All right, I guess just me. Well, one cool thing is the university is we're trying to work with them doing the alt protein project here, and then some other relatively mission aligned groups is actually make increase those options for alternative proteins on campus at the dining halls. So not only make the existing ones better, because a lot of them cooking them on bulk takes a little bit just more new techniques for the chefs to learn and things like that, and then also increasing those options is a great way not only to reduce the impact of the dining halls, but also to make people more make alternative proteins normalized and help the culture that way. That's a really good thing that you mentioned. Yeah.
So on the marketing influencer side, I mean, one of the problems as I see is that, I mean, this is a really tough audience. Like, you know, we had the climate communications workshop yesterday, and the first thing they said was, who is your audience? A lot of this audience, if we're really invested in this, we've gone plant-based, like we're going vegetarian or vegan, and trying to get the vegan audience to say, you know, do you want to come back to cultivated meat or fermented meat, I think is a non-starter. So who's the audience for this? And because that feels like a tough
Eaters.
conversation.
There's meat eaters. Yeah.
I'm a meat eater and I grew up eating raw meat. Like my cow is mooing within those aspects. Yeah. I mean, like a lot of vegetarians or vegans or whatever will be disgusted by that, but it is, I raise my kids to understand what chicken is and where it comes from. Like I'm an environmentalist. I've been doing this for like over 2 decades and I've been pushing this aspect of it. So even within us, looking at, I diversify my stuff there. So that's where the alternatives have to come in to place as you look. I'm from Grant County. We're farmers. We're dairy farmers as well. So the livelihood and other aspects. So looking at different feed-based aspects to reduce carbon from our stocks as you can look at it. But so like these things of alternatives as we grow, like we need to look at those. We're not looking at vegans, right? We're not like vegetarians. Yes, there are alternative plant-based stuff, but they're not going to go to the other stuff. So like these are things we need to think about. And I educate my children on those things, but I call it happy meat. You know, like when we first started looking at like how are we also doing like happy meat is we're making sure where we're getting our meat, it's taken care of in the right way, right, within those aspects. So, and now the alternative parts of it, that is like technology is coming, and so like these are things we need to think about, educate people about, and see how we can bring more of that to mainstream. And I think these are ways we need to push it forward. You know, I'm one of those. I will not give up my meat, right? Like that is like, and I understand the other side of it, but like these are, and there's so many people out there. We cannot, and I think our marketing and what we do, we can't, you know, eat less meat. People are offended by that. So I think like our marketing is wrong. You know, I think we need to change how we market these things because you offend those people. No, I love my meat, right? Like I don't want to eat less, but start talking about health, talk about protein, talk about like different, I think we need to change how we address and how we market ourselves.
This is this one question could be a whole like day. But I'm so glad you brought it up because again, this is not we don't even at GFI, we don't even use the word vegan or vegetarian. That's not our audience at all. If you're eating if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, so I'm vegan, if you're eating whole pulses, whole beans, if you're eating, keep doing that. Good, fantastic, keep doing that. No one is telling you to do anything else. But if you're in the billions with the B of humans on this planet that love meat and think it's delicious and want to keep eating more and more of it, then what's the harm in other choices? What's the harm in diversifying your choices?
Coming back to her point, I think that we really need to think about where we're marketing. I mean, this needs to be in the barbecue.
For sure, for sure. Oh God, I'm so glad you said that. St. Louis is, okay, you know Pappy's? You know Pappy's? So Pappy's is like barbecue central for St. Louis. I know Kansas City and St. Louis have a barbecue thing going on. Pappy's, last year, the chef at Pappy's, totally, and they introduced with low fanfare an option on their menu that was a plant-based barbecue, and from a local startup named by the name of Mark Engel, Third Taste Foods. I forget the name of it. It's a startup, so it's not yet a full company. But the chef embraced it and had it on their menu and did a taste test for 6 months. It was priced at the same, right? It was interesting because many people couldn't tell the difference. They did different experiments where they didn't even say it was, but they wanted to be also honest with people. So they wanted to be transparent about what it was. So you're absolutely right. We have to not be in the places where, and sorry, grocery stores, right? So these options shouldn't be in the funky little refrigerator by the bathroom in the back. It should be where meat eaters are buying their meat. It should be right there. You know who does this kind of good? It's Walmart. I'm not a big Walmart fan, but Walmart does that pretty good, like in terms of signage. But my local grocery store, there's one that, again, puts it in the freaky little refrigerator in the back by all the dented green beans. You know what I'm talking about? And so for the freaky people to want that plant-based meat, what does that say? What does that say? So you need to put it where people are buying meat. Target does it, yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
we were talking about little to big things we can do as individuals. Imagine like you work at a grocery store, you're a manager. I mean, there are things that you can decide to even help influence this on a small level.
Yeah. And I like the discussion also about like what Ryan was talking about dining halls. And you can think about this in a micro way and a macro way. Micro way is what's on your plate, what you're eating this morning, what you're eating later on today, what you're eating for dinner, what you buy at the grocery store. That's a micro way of thinking of this. And that's important. And there's all sorts of there's an entity called Greener by Default that works with campuses across the country that changes the choice setting. Anyone here a fan of the book Nudge about behavioral economics? And so nudges are all about, to what extent can we change the choice architecture to make the more sustainable option, the more affordable option, the default option, where you have to ask for conventional. That changes things. You know who's doing that right now? Right now? The New York City hospital system. The New York City hospital system has changed all of their menus so that plant-based options are the default. If you want meat, you have to ask for it. Yes. He's vegan. I'm not going to talk about this right now. That's a different, right. Anyway, I know we are at time. I can't thank you enough on behalf of Ryan and I can't thank you enough. I could tell already that I want to be colleagues and friends with all of you people. We do really appreciate, we know you had a lot of choices about where to spend your morning. We appreciate you getting some of your brain trust on this paper, because selfishly, that was our secret agenda all along, was to pull it out of your brain. So thank you. I think this gentleman put a treatise right there in his corner. Just really, really, really appreciate you all spending time with us.